This is the second part in a 3-part series taking you from knowing nothing to being fluent in your target language. If you haven't seen the first video yet, I'll link it in the description below, because this one builds directly on that. This is the exact process I'm using myself when I'm studying languages. I'm Nick, I speak 4 languages, and I'm currently working on my 5th. At this point, you should have reached 200 words that are the basic framework, and you should also have a base of about 50 words that are specific to whatever you're going to be consuming as your interest for study. It could be some sort of book series, it could be a series that you watch as a show, and at this point, those are probably going to be the most efficient things, but it really depends on your own interests. I have a heavy bias towards reading, especially manga. That's probably the easiest way to start reading, because you don't get all of those descriptions. I've said that so many times at this point, but yeah, manga all the way. That's the perfect way to move on once you've reached that base of around 250 words. Your next goal should not be fluency. Your next goal should be to reach the point where you can start watching blog content, for those of you that like that, and you can start interacting with people. When I say start interacting with people, I do not mean that you're responding perfectly when you're having a conversation. It just means that you understand the basic gist of what a person is saying or writing. If you're just chatting, you're able to provide some sort of response and they can understand what you mean by it. At this point, we're mainly focused on understanding content. We want to understand as much as possible before we really start producing, because producing language is always going to be more complicated. Well, let's talk about how to consume content at this stage without drowning. We're doing the same thing we did at the beginning when we started learning language, which is not setting the goal of doing a lot right away. We're starting slow. Maybe you read a chapter, maybe you don't read as much as an entire chapter, maybe you watch one episode of a series, maybe you watch half an episode. It really shouldn't be a big thing, because you're starting something new. The higher note you can end it on after you're done with your day, the easier it's going to be to come back to it the next day. So don't do too much. Eventually, it will just feel like a habit. You'll be able to do it because it feels wrong if you don't. In my experience, that's one of the best ways to build real consistency, and it works just as well for language learning. Your goal now, when you're watching a series or reading books, is not to understand everything. Your goal is not to look up every single word that you don't understand. Your task is to consume content. When you're watching content or reading, when you're watching content specifically, make sure you're not watching it with subtitles in your own native language. That's an easy way to not learn anything. I've spent countless hours watching content in Japanese, like anime, and I still don't know how to speak Japanese, because I had English subtitles on the entire time. The same thing applies to reading. Don't translate everything. It's fine to let words you don't understand just stay words you don't understand for now. If you stop and translate constantly, you'll lose the entire flow. We want the process to be enjoyable, and looking up words all the time is not enjoyable. The reason is that as you consume content, even if you don't understand everything, you gradually start understanding more and more of the context. That leads to you learning more words naturally, without really noticing it. Over time, you'll have few words you don't understand. Me, for instance, I don't understand every single word when I read something like Raven Master, and I definitely wouldn't understand every single word if I was reading Fairy Tail in Ukrainian. That's still too difficult for me. But I can understand enough of the context to gradually pick up more and more words. If you're at the point where you're picking up about 90% of the words, maybe 80. If it's less than that, it's probably too difficult, but 90% is the ideal. Don't be too skeptical in the very beginning, but if you're 5 chapters in and there are still a lot of the unknown words on every page, not just 4 or 5, then it's probably too hard. That is, of course, talking about manga. If you're reading a book and you have about 4 or 5 words that you don't understand on a page, it might be too easy. Remember that this is probably the first time that you're doing this in another language. Watching and reading in a new language is a new skill. You're not going to be perfect. You're probably going to make mistakes, and you're probably going to feel a bit stupid. Everyone starts that way, and it's completely fine. It passes faster than you think. Try to find something where you understand most of it, and it has to be something that you're interested in. Don't watch kids shows just because they're easy. If you can enjoy kids shows for nostalgia, that's perfect, but don't force yourself to watch something you wouldn't actually enjoy. In the first video, I talked about how I would never start with grammar. If I really wanted to do something grammar related, the most I do is look at verbs. I wouldn't start with grammar because I don't like it. Unless you're maybe 1 in 20 people who actually enjoy studying grammar, which my wife does. I don't understand her. Grammar is boring and too abstract when you're starting. But at this stage, when you have that base, you can make an argument for it. I still don't think it's necessary, but it's no longer as abstract because you're already seeing sentences through reading. If you do grammar now, I'd only study things that I was actually encountering. It might feel like a waste to throw away. It might feel like a waste to throw away your old routine, but I'm still going to be suggesting it. This isn't you giving up on something, and that's an important distinction. This is you moving on to the next step. You wouldn't keep doing normal pull-ups once you can do weighted pull-ups. You might warm up with them, but then you move on. At this stage, memorizing vocabulary isn't necessary. What got you here won't get you to the next level. My goal with this channel is to make sure you don't have to change your entire weekly routine to learn a language. If you don't drop what's no longer efficient, language learning becomes more complicated than it needs to be. It takes up more time, and at that point you will have no choice but to change your weekly routine. You probably built a decent habit of studying words or doing exercises. If you're using the app that I'm working on, you're probably done with it at this point, unless I decide to add an option for continuing, which I don't think is necessary. Your goal has changed, so your routine should change too. That means replacing your habit of studying new words with spending the same time consuming content. It's also way more enjoyable. Once you're starting to near the end of this stage, you can probably start experimenting as well with writing to people or talking. But it can feel difficult to move from not producing anything to talking to real people. If you feel like you need to ease into it, AI can actually be a great help. You can start by writing, then get corrections, then move to voice once you feel ready. That way, talking to real people won't feel like your first time when it actually is. Our old routine was easy to bring with us, so we still want that. Have content you can carry with you. A normal day for me at this point is probably reading a chapter or two on the bus, whether I'm going to the gym or I'm going to work, and maybe watching an episode during lunch. Right now, it's Pokemon, because nostalgia works for me, and that's all I need. It's better to quit while I'm still enjoying it, like I mentioned, so I actually want to come back next day. Stick to the same time windows that you used to do when you were studying words, just change what you do during them. That makes the habit transition a lot easier. Your next goal is reaching a point where you can hold a decent conversation, follow what people are saying, and gradually understand more through listening and reading. This stage should realistically last no more than 4 or 5 months. Towards the end, you should start mixing in slightly harder content. Shows that were impossible before will start becoming more realistic. You might move from manga to books, or from easier books to harder ones. Once you can follow shows quite easily, you're probably not far off from conversation. If you want to go further and move from conversation to fluency, that's what the next video will be about. And if you're looking for more resources on how to start your language learning, then check out this playlist for info about the app that I'm building.